Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Murphy and your colleagues for coming in today. Just staying on the card for a moment and separating it out from the costs and the project overruns that have happened, I think it is a great thing to have in the city now, finally. And I understand it's to be extended to DublinBikes on a trial period, is that correct?
Not necessarily. That's a system controlled by JC2Co, who offer it.
Is it something you're looking at?
We were looking at it with JC2Co, yes, but it haven't come to a conclusion on that, nor has Dublin City come to a conclusion with their negotiation with JC2Co and even extending the bike scheme.
No, does that come under your authority, the Dublin Bike Scheme, at all?
Well, it comes as something that we're going to fund the next stage, yes.
Yeah. You're funding the next stage?
Yes, we'll fund it.
I know that there's some money was released from the government for, I think it was pre-planning and that kind of aspect of the actual scheme, but my understanding was the delivery of bikes and the actual stations, that still is to maintain with JC2Co, is that correct?
That's right. It's a proprietary system, so the extension of it will be through JC2Co. Dublin City Council negotiating with them about the extension. There'll be insufficient advertising revenue to support the extension, and that's why there needs to be a state intervention. That state intervention will come through funds that we provide to Dublin City Council.
Have you an idea of how much that's going to cost?
We've set aside $2.5 million this year if there's successful negotiations, and I think perhaps in the order of $5 million. The phase extension down to Docklands and to Houston Station. But this year we can only provide $2.5 million. We've set aside $2.5 million to go into
for 2013.
For 2013.
2.5 for 2014.
Yes.
Okay. And the negotiations have been going on for quite a while now, haven't they?
They have, yes. I mean, if you recall, the way the Dublin Bike Scheme was set up was that there was advertising rights secured by JC2Co on the basis of giving social community facilities. The Dublin Bike Scheme was one there, was associated with that. They've developed it, they've provided it, they've borne the cost of it, in essence, and therefore, they're not actually a bike provider, they're actually an advertiser. And so it's trying to get an extension to the project using the proprietary system. It's been the bulk of the negotiations.
I was on the council in 2009, Dublin City Council, when we launched the bikes, and within 3 months I think we were moving to try and negotiate for an extension to the scheme because it had proved so successful so quickly.
Yes.
So we're hitting in now into 2013 and we're still in those negotiations. Does the NTA have a role in those?
Well, I think we've assisted the City Council by, we actually funded some economic advice to them. KPMG, they brought in KPMG to assist them in negotiations. I don't think they've been negotiating since 2009. I think basically that restarted about 15 months ago. There was been a gap period, then it restarted again. It has been slower. We had set aside money last year. We were disappointed it hadn't come to conclusion last year. But we understand that it is going to come to conclusion next 3 months, a confirmation that they're going to, agree to the extension scheme or they're not. If they don't agree to the extension scheme, well then we have to look at that scenario. We may have to look at a parallel bike scheme that we will develop ab initio ourselves and fund that for Dublin City Council.
I'm really against the idea of a parallel bike scheme. I think it'll have massive operational difficulties, but at the same time I recognise that all the cards are in JC2Co's hands here because they operate the existing scheme. Just going back to the $5 million amount, so we've put aside $5 million for the next 2 years, and that's for the rollout of the extra stations in the phase.
That's right. Yes.
Including those extra bikes. I think it's going to be 5,000 bikes in 40 stations. Is that right?
I couldn't give you the exact figures now. Perhaps you can take that.
It's actually about, I think, 1,000 extra bikes at about 40 extra stations.
Extra bikes, 40 extra stations. And then what's JC? If we're spending the money on that, if the Irish taxpayer is paying for the bikes and the stations, the contract we're negotiating with JC2Co is to then run the bikes then over the period of 10, 15, 20 years. Is that it?
The remainder of their contract, which is the contract associated with their advertising rights.
Okay, thanks. I actually didn't mean to touch upon DublinBikes just because it came up in relation to the Leap card. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is the rollout of the real-time passenger information and the apps for Dublin Bus and the DART. I think it's been excellent. I mean, I know there's been problems with them, and I know from time to time when I use the bus myself, the information isn't to hand, unfortunately. But I think by and large, it's greatly improved people's experience of public transport, and I'm sure it must have increased numbers using public transport as well. I'd like to talk a bit, just initially, about the taxi regulator. that office came into your office in 2012?
1st of January 2011.
Sorry, 2011. And did all the staff move across as well?
Yes.
How many staff was that?
At the time, they had a mixture of agency staff and actual staffing. They were in the order of 30 at the time.
And then staff costs then were borne by the NTA?
That's right. They moved into our reporting, and they would be captured in this annual report, annual accounts of 2011.
And so I take it, and the money the Department of Transport was paying out to the taxi regulator's office then gets paid to you to cover those staff costs.
In fact, it was funded off the licensing income. There were no grant payments to the taxi office.
Okay.
It was funded off the licensing income, and there was a taxi surplus available, and that was being utilised because there was a deficit between licensing income and the expenditure of the office.
Okay. And so there's the building that the taxi regulator was in on Fitzwilliam Square. We're still renting that building.
We're still renting that building. Yes.
What's the annual rent?
It's 170,000 euros. And it's still being used. We just this month we've moved across the bulk of the staff from that office over to our office in Harcourt Lane because the OPW vacated a floor in ours and gave an opportunity to consolidate the whole organisation. So we have all our organisation essentially just consolidating into one premises. And at the same time, we've actually, through the OPW, found a public sector body who's going to take over the Fitzwilliam Square premises from the summer.
Which public sector body is
the
that?
National Council for Curriculum and Assessment.
National Council for Curriculum and Assessment. They're coming in the summer.
That's right.
How big is the building?
The building accommodates about 35 staff. I can't give you the square area, but that's roughly the size.
And the National Council Curriculum Assessment
that matches their numbers very well, yes. And they're located currently in Merrion Square, so it's lease is up.
We don't know. Oh, the lease is up.
That lease is up, and the OPW is. They're going to be able to reduce their costs by moving to our premises, and we're going to be able to reduce costs by about 250,000 a year by renting this Fitzwilliam Square premise, consolidating all our, say, reception, security, heating and lighting, and IT all on our side.
Great. And then in terms of the rent review on that, there's a rent review every 5 years on the lease on the Fitzwilliam building.
Yes.
It's coming in 2014.
Yes, that's right.
What will happen then with the rent review?
Well, as I understand, it's an upward-only rent review lease, and I don't know what will happen then. The way we're doing the kind of sublease to the National Council Curriculum Assessment is in conjunction with the OPW is going to be a fixed. It's going to be a fixed rental out for either 5 or 11 years. We've yet to conclude that agreement. So I suppose we as an organisation, if there's a rent review increase, we'll suffer. The kind of extra cost of that. We won't be able to pass it on.
Just go back a step, sorry, you were saying about the OPW's involvement.
Yeah, well, the OPW is essentially involved in all our premises stuff. When we were set up in December 2009, we subsumed the Dublin Transportation Office, which was located in an OPW leased building in Irish Life Centre. The OPW want to exit their whole arrangement, the Irish Life, and then we needed extra space we took staff in from the department and the RPA, and we went to the OPW and said, have you any buildings in the state stock either that you own or that you're renting that are available? And they had Harcourt Lane available for us, so we moved into that. That's an OPW held lease with the prime owner, and then we just pay the OPW. And similarly, the OPW then looked across the public sector for our Fitzwilliam Square premises. Could they find a public body that would take it?
Then, if there is an increase in the rent on Fitzwilliam Square, you bear the cost of that?
But where the agreement that we're doing, National Council for Curriculum and Assessment via the OPW, is going to be fixed for 5 or 11 years.
It's there for 5 or 11 years.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Then whoever owns the building in Fitzwilliam Square, if they increase,
bear the cost. I mean, the balance here is that rentals are very very cheap across, commercial office rentals, and the National Council for Curriculum Assessment knows what is the value of rental properties, and we've had an independent valuation of that done. The OPW is doing broker between the two parties and agreeing the rent.
And so, the building for Swing Square is whoever the landlords are. Are they have they any other buildings that have been leased out by government departments?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you.
But in terms of the contract, when it comes to sitting down on it, is it very much up to them in terms of what they can fix the lease at, or?
Well,
what's the break clause position for us, if necessary?
well, there's no break clause in for, say, us as an authority. What we inherited was a lease that went out to 2024 with upward-only rent reviews at 5-year cycles. So, I mean, that's what we've inherited, and we've tried to manage that as best we can to offload it and consolidate and reduce costs.
They increase the lease costs on you and the NTA. We're stuck with that.
Yeah, we were stuck with it, yes, because it is a contract that the Commission for Taxi Regulation has entered into.
It's not a great position to be in.
Well, we prefer not to be in a position and not have the opportunity, but we try and effect savings in other ways. This is just a fact of life, really.
Do we know why that particular building was chosen by the taxi regulator at the time?
I have no idea why it was chosen.
Would that be on record in terms of the negotiations, or the different buildings that might have been looked at, or the contract negotiations, or?
They may have records for that,
But if there were records in the taxi regulator, they'd now be in your records.
There would be, yes. I've never looked into that.
Would you mind looking into it?
Yes,
I'd be interested to see how that lease came to be negotiated, and why that particular building was chosen, and why that particular rent was set, etc. The various details, if they're there, because
what I can find, whether there is that background, all I do know is I have the lease and the final deal as such. I don't know if I can say that there is other material.
Just given the potential liability, it'd be good to know how we got ourselves in that position. I know circumstances have changed since the lease was negotiated in the first instance, but just to look back and see,
yes,
and it could be helpful. In relation then to, prior to the taxi regulator moving into the NTAA, that operation was essentially self-funded through taxi licensing, was it?
It wasn't actually self-funded from taxi licensing. Their accounts for their final year of operation, 2010, showed that they dipped into the surplus. The surplus that had been built up when the very big payments we made and the big explosion in the industry, to the tune of 2.8 million euros. So that it was essentially underfunded from licensing income and reliant on the surplus.
The licensing income that comes in annually, do we have a figure for that?
Yes. The licensing income in 2011 was 6.4 million.
That covers the public service vehicles and the associated vehicle licenses, is that right?
That's right.
Is that money ring fence then for the taxi industry, or?
Well, that comes into the authority just as bus licensing income comes into the authority as well from our bus licensing function, and then it's spent as
really,
we collect essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
Regarding our funding, I in my briefing paper that I sent to the committee in advance, when the Department of Transport and Finance were negotiating the setting up of our organisation in 2008, they said that when we subsumed the Commission for Taxi Regulation, we needed to rely on their surplus for quite a number of years, and we've been underfunded administratively from the start on the basis that we were going to gradually dip into this taxi surplus. Okay. So we need that generally for our administrative expenses.
That was for the first couple of years, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, the idea was for the first couple of years, because the expectation was that it would be gone by that stage, the taxi surplus. But actually we've managed it, and we still have 15 million available, and we want to...
You free to spend that all?
No, I mean, we're not free to spend it all. What we're doing each year is we're keeping to a minimum the amount that we dip into that surplus. So it was 1.9 million in 2011 in these accounts. I think it's 2.3 in 12, and projecting forward next year it'll be 3.5 million with a whole series of increased costs in taxi regulation and probably a drop in industry income. So it is gradually diminishing, the order of 2 to 3 million per year, but it should be able to take us out for quite a number of years in covering administrative expenses. Our salaries, there's an under provision for our salaries, for example, and our general costs.
Dipping into the surplus just for the taxi element of the
Just for the
whole-
organisation. In essence, it's all subsumed into the
okay.
organisation. We run it as one integrated organisation.
And then who decides the amount that you'll dip into it by, in terms of whether it be 2.9 or 3.5?
It comes from our, our authority as such. We do a budget projection at the start of the year. We show what the income is going to be in the Oireachtas grants, what the licensing income is going to be, what is the cost basis, what we're spending it on, and then we target a budget for the year. We monitor that budget target. So it's determined at authority at board level.
So if you're doing a projection forward for the year, towards the end of the year, you notice the shortfalls coming through, you then decide to dip into the surplus.
Yeah, well, yes, that's correct. Well, that's the only mechanism we have to fund, say, well, like the 1.9 million deficit was that the deficit occurred and the money was drawn down from,
Safety net that you have in terms of the funding.
That's correct, yes.
And 1.9 million as a percentage of the total spend of the organisation is about what in terms of
Well, we spent in 2011, 512 million. So it's a small portion, 0.2%.
Just keeping on the issue of taxis just for a moment, in relation to the ranks and racism, it's something that is constantly brought to my attention. The racism that is happening between taxi drivers in Dublin. What's the authority's responsibility there?
Well, of course, like yourself, we'd be shocked at any racism occurring. The problem there is a matter of control and enforcement. Is you get a lot of anecdote about it, so we don't know the actual level of it. And secondly, is the regulation. We don't actually have a regulation that can cover a matter like that. That covers more generally by other legislation about equality of treatment, etc. So we don't actually have a regulation about racist behaviour of a taxi driver. That would be one that we report then.
Controlling ranks, I mean, the taxi ranks, you've got a responsibility there for how they're operated, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
in accordance with the regulations, which is that people have to be within the rank situation when the queue have to be available for hire, etc. But that's where the regulations go and what the Act allows us to do.
and who monitors those regulations or who enforces them? Who goes? Do you have a team going to the ranks and looking at behaviour?
Yes, we have, yes. So we've a team of 9 people, an enforcement team of 9 people, specially trained enforcement team. And then we do a lot of joint operations with the Gardaí. So last year we checked out 14,000 vehicles, actually, checked them out, checked those out, either stopped or at joint operations or individually. And then we monitor ranks. To increase the monitoring of taxi ranks, we saw that a problem in 2011. We contracted in some extra resources through our contractor SGS, who do our general vehicle licensing, and they have provided us a special compliance team that monitor the key taxi ranks that have been providing problems to see if there's appropriate behaviour, etc. on those as regards the regulations, proper queuing, etc.
St. Stephen's Green taxi rank be one of those?
Well, there's a range of them. I mean, people say that the O'Connell Street rank is one that has led to a lot of problems, and the guards have been very actively involved in that area. It's very close to Store Street. They've been very actively involved in that. And actually, the guards are one of the key parties in this kind of management on street, also of the behaviour of taxi people beside our enforcement staff. One could imagine that, of course, a guard has much more effective powers, really, in dealing with people on the street than an enforcement officer of our authority.
Have complaints been made to your office about Irish-only driver ranks and foreign national-only driver ranks operating in the city?
Not actual formal complaints, but again, there's anecdotal talk that there are ranks that are reserved for, particularly the talk is of the O'Connell Street rank, that is one. But it's very hard to get the bottom of
The O'Connell Street rank?
that. It is that it's not that people who are kind of not Irish nationals, or either that they are Irish nationals but they aren't, say, white Irish nationals, are being excluded from using those ranks. Now, again, it's very hard to get the bottom of the anecdotal information.
You're doing something about it?
I don't want to claim that we are doing anything about it because our powers are very limited in that regard. Perhaps Hugh, you take up that point for me.
Well, we do a certain amount of enforcement activities at various ranks around the place. Nowadays, enforcement officers covering the whole country 24 hours a day, there's a limit to what you can actually cover. But the various ranks, including the likes of ranks on O'Connell Street and elsewhere, would be visited on an intermittent basis, and whatever offences we detect in accordance with our legislation, we can deal with those. And on top of that, then the Gardaí will give particular attention to various places where they have reports on from time to time as well.
Have you ever, I don't know where it's not, sanctioned a taxi driver for racist behaviour? Or investigated a taxi driver for allegations of racist behaviour?
No, it's the formal, actually, either a formal complaint in that regard. You know, we would investigate all complaints. If we had had a formal complaint, we would have investigated it. I suppose it would be the complaint regards their behaviour with the customer, and matters like that.
But you're the regulator for the industry, and we know that there's a particular rank on O'Connell Street which might have particular problems in relation to racism between taxi drivers, and certain drivers being excluded because of their perceived ethnicity or colour or nationality. Why not focus your attention on O'Connell Street, have someone down there the entire time to ensure that that's not happening, and where it is seen to be happening, where there is a particular taxi driver or group of them excluding others, call them up on it?
Well, I think to say is to what we do regulate or what we do manage is that the rank operates normally, and a taxi driver pulls up and there's a space there and they're allowed to use it. So when we're doing the monitoring of it, that gets picked up on that. So that's a kind of sideways way of dealing with the issue. What I'm saying is that under our Act and the way we're set up, we actually can't get into the area of, you know, that there may be racist interactions between taxi drivers as such, you know, and their relationships.
There's this kind of mob-like behaviour where certain people or groups of people are controlling ranks. These are meant to be ranks accessible to every single taxi driver who wants to pull up and take a passenger from them, but they can't because it's a white-only rank.
Yeah, well, they can pull up, and they're monitored, and they're ensured that they can pull up. I think.
But are you ensuring that? That's my point.
Well, we are ensuring it, and I say that's why it's a kind of sideways way of dealing with the issue. We're ensuring that the rank is available. Taxi driver pulls up, taxi driver can use the rank, and then nobody can stop that taxi driver using the rank because the rank's available. And so if our enforcement team is there, that's ensured. What I can't deal with is that there may be sub-issues around the industry, maybe frightening off people even going to the rank and stuff like that. That's a broader issue, and I wouldn't like to claim that we are dealing with it when we're not.
Why not try and deal with it, though? Why not, you know, implement a program for, you know, improving integration between taxi drivers and, you know, knowledge awareness, different courses that are undertaken by other departments and in other areas of Irish life to help with these kinds of issues? I mean, why not take it on as your role?
I think that's a fair point. It's something that we will look at. We had looked at it working with Dublin City Council, has kind of a strategy also about, you know, fairness, equality of treatment, and partnering with them because these issues are particularly in the Dublin area. So I think your point is taken. Let us go off and see, can we develop something that would encourage integration or work with other authorities who are doing it already.
I think you should, and I think you should take it upon yourselves and you should discuss at the board that it is your responsibility to deal with this, because every time I get into a taxi and every time I'm out in Dublin at night, I see it all the time, and I hear the complaints, and I get them to my office from all sorts of people and from every walk of life. And I think it's time we got proactive on this and said that this is within our industry that we regulate, that we control, and we've got to do something about it. I mean, we had this campaign a few years ago where taxi drivers were even marking their cars saying Irish taxi driver, and I think they used the tricolour to show that, you know, as in that was a good thing, that they'd be discriminating in that way. I didn't hear anyone from the taxi regulator's office doing anything about it at all at the time. This has been hanging around for years, and I think it's time for you as the authority to get proactive. Go to the minister, look for extra funding if that's required, or look for the mandate, or just take it upon yourselves as a board to tackle this issue. It's an important one, and it's going to lead to serious problems, I think, in the future at ranks in terms of violence or something else.
No, I think your point's well made, and we'll go off and we'll see what we can do this year on some measures there. I mean, education raising measures or whatever that we can do and work with other bodies, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.